Welcome to Subversive, a new and exclusive limited series brought to you by Wasafiri. Each month, we'll be in conversation with a poet who's releasing a new collection in 2025. Their varied work challenges the limits of the Western lyric, reflecting on living in a turbulent world while holding tenaciously onto hope. My name is Prerana Kumar. I'm a writer currently doing an LAHP placement with Wasafiri. Today, I'll be talking to Dr. Nick Makoha about his second collection, The New Carthaginians, forthcoming with Penguin Press. Nick Makoha is a Ugandan poet. He's the winner of the 2021 Ivan Druids Prize and Poetry London Prize. Nick's debut collection, Kingdom of Gravity, was shortlisted for the Felix Dennis Prize for Best First Collection and was one of The Guardian's best books of the year. He's also an associate editor for Wasafiri. Hi, Nick. It's
Hey,
great to
how
be
you doing?
with us today. I'm good. So let's just jump straight into talking about this book. Um, I have it with me.
Oh, yeah, snap. Oh, here you go.
Yay! So the New Carthaginians is described by Roger Robinson as a poetic odyssey. In this
Okay.
collection, time and with it the world is out of joint. It engages with the historical crisis where a hijacked plane landed at Entebbe International Airport in 1976, leading to Idi Amin's Uganda becoming a pariah state. We encounter three characters: the poet, a black Icarus, and a resurrected Jean-Michel Basquiat, the artist, as they journey through a time that is both our own and not. So we're going to begin with a rapid fire because I've read a little bit about your collection, but can you describe your collection in 5 words?
So it is in 5 words. I would say it's a myth. It's a myth. It is also a biography. It is also a I guess a quest or spiritual journey. I don't know. That's not 5 words, but it's a quest. And um it is a painting. And my final one, I would say Uh, it is a musical score or a score. Let's call it that.
Oh, wow. So this is
Yeah.
interesting because I've actually, all of my questions kind of reflect these words. So now we're kind of
All
just
right.
going to go through them.
Okay.
So many of the poems I found engaged with flying and falling, both as like a metaphor and movement across, I think, histories, borders, countries. In one of your poems, one of your speakers says, "This flight bears the sweetness of wings, but is not a cure for exile." And I could really feel that exile running as an engine in the work. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the historical context that you write through.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Uganda originally. I left my country because of the Idi Amin regime, and there's a part of me that just feels left behind, or a part of me that I feel I've had to let go of in many ways. I think in many places I don't feel like home, and the only place, if I'm honest, where I really feel like home is with my immediate family. So it's with my wife and my two children. And that's not to say that other people aren't friendly, aren't welcoming, but that's the only place where I feel that my who I am and my roots actually exist. So um, uh, at one point I knew 4 languages, and I'm embarrassed to say that right now I know one, and I know Swahili a little bit. I used to know Luganda, Samir. Now I can only understand it through the music of my mother speaking to her friends. Because when I came here when I was 4 years old, there were not other Ugandans who I was in the close proximity of to share that language. And even though my mum spoke those languages, she didn't speak it to me, not for any malicious reason, but because she was out of work. She was a single parent. And so the language that was predominantly in my brain was English. So there's not like there is a part of me that pines for that, if I'm honest. But there's also a part of me that understands that I am an African body in a Western experience. And and like I said, going back to even though my wife is I mean, she's of many places. She's like part Moroccan, part Israeli, part Trinidadian. Uh and but I don't know what her chemistry makes me feel at home. My children or a direct route of me, so they're automatically home. And so there's a part of me that's always writing about this sense of loss of a place that technically no longer exists, but also a
Mm.
place I never got to grow up in and build my identity from. So even though I am African in my origins, uh, there's a part of me that is detached from it, and that detachment is what I write from, you know.
Yeah, I can really feel that in the book, that kind of like sense of hybridization. And I think I can sense the longing, but it's also very self-aware longing because I feel like sometimes writers can romanticize homelands, but I feel like this collection does more than just long uncritically. I feel like it's very consciously thinking about these concepts. And something you said about how your wife is a mix of a lot of things, how you're a mix of a lot of things, and when you come together, that's what makes it feel like home. This kind of hybrid voice. I kind of picked up on that in the book as well because we moved through three characters. I
Yeah.
think the poet, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Icarus, and I felt like these are three very different characters, but they also merge and bleed into each other in very interesting ways. And I was very curious why you picked these particular figures and how did you encounter them? So if you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer, which is, so they are three different characters, but so there's a poet, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Icarus. In this version, Icarus isn't the Icarus of on common mythology. He is a black Icarus living in contemporary time. Basquiat is Basquiat, but he isn't constrained by uh, the typical narrative that people have around him. It's quite a negative narrative in the sense. I mean, ge as an artist, absolute genius. I don't think there will be anyone ever like him. But a lot of times when you hear the story, it is the same narrative of how he was a drug addict and all of those things, and he was more than that. And sometimes those were only a small fraction of his life. There were other things that he did that were, like beyond exemplary. For example, I know from one of his assistants that, in New York, where he lived in Manhattan, he would often welcome young artists to his house, and he would allow them to create art, and he would provide them food, and he would invest in a lot of uh, community projects, and as a private, as a silent investor, not for his name. But these things aren't
Mm.
talked about, and he's often perceived as this kind of inferior artist to say Warhol, and I think he was. I mean, Warhol is amazing. I love Warhol stuff, but he was better than Warhol, and we. I don't think he's probably one of the best prolific artists that we have. So the reason I chose Basquiat was because, you know, in many ways he chose me, because I went to the Boom for Real exhibition with my friend Roger Robinson. We had been invited to do a workshop separately, and we met each other and we're like, "Oh, what are you doing here? What are you doing here?" And then
Mm.
when we finished both our workshops, they said to us, "Oh, by the way, because you're doing the workshops for us for this Basquiat project, you get to go to the exhibition for free." And when I went to that exhibition, I kind of burst into tears, which I'd never done. I've only
So it's
cried
like
like
a
that.
really visceral
Yeah,
reaction.
I've only cried like that. Once with my wife, I think I burst into tears before we were married. I think when two of my friends died, when my uncle died, when both my children were born, but I've burst into tears. I think when I got married, so it was equivalent to that, and I was very taken aback because I was like, "What is this?" And then,
Can I quickly ask, what was it?
yeah,
What did it unlock in you that kind of
at that time,
emotion on?
at the moment in time, I didn't know.
Mm.
At the moment in time, I didn't know, but it just kept happening. And I've never done that with any other paintings, and I like to go to see art things. I particularly like to go with my wife because she's very her take on the world is very what's the word? Insightful, I'd say insightful. So, but after like I started a PhD, and when I was there with my professor, Dr. Sarah Howe, uh she told me to go and investigate that. So I did a research trip to America to look at Basquiat paintings again because I mean, if you go into my library, I have a lot of catalogs of Basquiat stuff.
Mm.
But looking at a painting of Basquiat and then looking just at in a book, it's not the same thing. You have to get looking at Basquiat is a physical entity. So I had to go back
Mm.
and research that. And what I realized is that what was happening to me at the time is that I'd seen a way to express my exilic experience in a way I hadn't done before. So the thing about Basquiat, I mean, there are many good things about him, but one of them is that in his paintings is he centralizes the black body. So oftentimes as a black body, I mean, I could speak for other bodies, marginalized bodies, but as a black body, we're always on the periphery. We're always the intruder or the
Mm.
newcomer. Even if you mention my country or even my continent, people will speak of it as the third world
Yeah.
or a minor economy, or they'll be known for their famine or their bad or their bad economics or their world debt. All of these are ways of putting that at the periphery of human existence. But what Basquiat does, he puts the black body at the center, but he also puts the whole of history into the painting. And he actually said one time when he was interviewed, I want to put the whole of history onto the page.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was looking for kind of codexes to help me translate it. And what I saw, somehow was that I can only say that clearly now. At the time, it was just, what are these tears? So if that makes sense. And the reason for Icarus, a lot of times in the book, there are themes of flights, different variations of flights. One of them is I had to flee my country. I look at a particular moment of Ugandan history, the Entebbe hijacking. That was required a plane. I had to leave my country because of flight. Oftentimes, as a child, I was in airports between my parents because of they were separated. I was in boarding schools. I lived in other countries. So always being in flight, I needed some kind of theme about flight. I wanted a mythical character, and that was it. And then there's another layer to that. The story of Icarus is in the book by Virgil, the Aeneid, and the central character is Aeneas. And Aeneas, when he's looking at the temple of Juno, he also sees the whole of his history on the frescoes, the six murals, and when he sees them, he bursts into tears. And that is the same experience I had. So there's a connection there. So Icarus is a version of myself in a way, if you think of that. Basquiat is a version of myself trying to put history on a page. And then there's me, the poet. So at first, I wasn't trying to write them as all me. I'm not narcissistic in that way. I was using characters to explore
Yeah.
different ways of looking. And then it was, my supervisor and my friend Roger, who's like a critical friend, he said, huh, do you realize these are kind of like you and they're kind of like musicians playing? So that's where I got the idea of the Deep Space Quartet. So
Uh,
yeah.
oh, there's
Sorry,
so
that was a
much.
long answer, but I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. There's so much. So is that, so if I remember correctly, in the Aeneid, Aeneas goes to Carthage, where he meets
Yes.
Dido. Is that where the title comes from? The new
Yeah, yeah,
Carthaginian?
absolutely. Well done. I like how I like how you're moving. You're paying attention. All right. So, yeah, so that's where I got Carthage from. So,
Mm,
a lot of times when we think of Carthage, in fact, the way it's portrayed a lot of times in modern history, you'd think Carthage was a part of Europe, but Carthage is a part of Africa.
yeah.
And so the new Carthaginians are those three characters. They are Basquiat, Icarus, and myself, the poet. So we are the new Carthaginians. Also, another kind of parallel there is, in this going to see art, like I said, my favorite person to go see art with is my wife. My second favorite person, not that my daughter doesn't like it. I like going with her, but she's mad busy all the time. My second favorite person is my son. So I went to see with him there are two paintings by Turner of the rise of the Carthaginian Empire and the fall of the Carthaginian Empire. One is at Tate Britain and one is at the National Gallery. And so, um, just like Turner, I was interested in the sense of empire and how empire impacts, because it's basically the empirical world that has forced me through colonialism, through, slavery to have to leave my country. If my country was stable, because Idi Amin was actually installed by the British. They thought he was a puppet that they could control, but he ran out. He went out of control, right? So I wanted to look at these themes of empire, but through a different lens. And Carthage is very just as Basquiat is integral. Carthage is integral. Icarus is integral, and myself, the poet, which is the, ex, the exile narrative, and also Aeneas is a person in exile. You know.
Yeah, it's so well crafted. And I was also picking up on how you were talking about so much art and I felt that like multi-textural. The poems felt very multi-textual, like they were kind of like collage-like in nature, like bringing out this new myth making. And I kind of loved how playful that was because we were speaking about exile and how they functioned so much, how like as an engine in the poems. But I also feel like these poems move beyond the experiences of like subjection or vulnerability or precarity that I think define a lot of Black experience or experiences of people of color, but also how they're represented in literature, in media. And so, um, yeah, I was really struck by that. And I wanted to, at the end of the book, you mentioned that there's an artistic technique that Basquiat uses, the exploded collage.
Mhm.
And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how you use that in writing from art.
Yeah, so I mean there's several layers to answer that question. So the first thing is, I want to see these paintings to get that emotion. So there are two things I'm trying to do. I'm really trying. I'm writing a phrastic poem. So there are a bunch of poems named after paintings by Basquiat. But the thing about ekphrasis, and one of the first forms of ekphrasis is the Shield of Achilles, where it depicts the Trojan Wars, right? So we get to see something through a metal shield. We see something becomes so visceral, it seems real. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to get that kind of a process to tell you something so visceral. You actually feel, am I here? Was I there? Is this happening? This happened. So that was one thing I was trying to achieve. Whether I achieved it or not is, that's, I mean, in my sense, I feel I did, but between the reader, whether I achieved it or not, that's up to them. But the thing about phrases is oftentimes I love good at phrases is hard to do. So a lot of times, I just did this in a workshop I just did. But for example, let's call you the Mona Lisa, um, which I actually went to. Like I said, my two favorite people to go see art. I hope to make a third, my daughter, but my two favorite people to go art are my wife and my son. I took my son to see the Mona Lisa at the Louvre, and he loved it. I was so surprised because he's such a cool guy. I didn't think he would feel it, but he was there observing it, right? And the Mona Lisa is beautiful, right? And if a lot of times like phrases is using one art, usually the literal language to describe another art form. But the Mona Lisa is so beautiful, she does not need to be described, right?
Mm.
But what that's not a phrases, which a lot of times that's what people do. They describe the painting to the person. You don't need to, just let the person see the painting, right? But real phrases is not just that, the observation of that world. It is the connection between the viewer, the art, the artist, and that chemical visceral emotion. So me crying or whatever you do, even your distaste, that is the ekphrasis happening, or where it takes you, that is the ekphrasis happening. So I wanted to get to that chemical reaction, right? So just as a preamble. But the other thing is before I'd even seen the Basquiat, because initially the book wasn't even called The New Carthaginians. The working title was called The Welcome Table. Not big for any other reason. I mean, it's uh, uh, it's just because I like the title, and it comes from it comes from what's his name? Let's forget his name. Um, I was working here, but it'll come to me. But so that was the working title, but it came from the idea. The actual things I was looking at was Leonardo da Vinci. I went to the British Museum, and he was doing. They had the Codex Sarundel on display, where it has all his knowledge, because he was more than just a painter. He was a scientist. He was a philosopher, and all his knowledge were in these books. And the theory I had at that time is because I'd stopped writing for a while poetry. I'd just written a play and I was still exhausted from writing my first book, Kingdom of Gravity. So I was still kind of following my heart until I could find something to write again. And what I realized is, what I was so impressed by Leonardo da Vinci. He put all his knowledge into this book. So I thought, what if I could put all my knowledge into one poem? So I wasn't thinking about a book. I was just thinking if I could put all my knowledge, all my understanding, all my philosophy, all my failures into just one poem, what is that possible? So I had these poems that were just starting out. And I just called them Codex, Codex 1, Codex 2, Codex 3, Codex 4. And that's actually so the beginning of the book actually started with the Codex, right? Um, I've kind of lost your question because I got excited. But what was your question?
Oh, you're kind of answering it right now. I was just talking about how exploded collage kind of
Yeah,
translated
so
into your
going back
writing
to the so
practice.
so so going so so the thing about it, going back to Basquiat, where he wanted to put all of knowledge into a painting, a canvas,
Mm.
I wanted to put the whole of my experience into one poem. There was a kind of synergy there. And
Yeah.
what I noticed, I went when I was traveling around America and also in Europe, and also I went to go to Canada to look at his work. What I noticed is, and speaking to his assistants, they said that's kind of how Basquiat worked. He 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 what he did is he layered temporalities, art had temporality,
Mm.
historical temporality, scientific temporalities along one another, repeating words, repeating thoughts, twisting them, playing with them, putting all his wisdom, his foolishness, everything on the page. And so basically what it does is it foregrounds the things of importance and and dissembles the things that are not important, and that's what I wanted to do. So ultimately what I was trying to achieve in the way Basquiat achieves a painting, I was trying to make a painting. But I was not just trying to make one painting, I was trying to make a bunch of poems that exist as one painting. So the New Carthaginians is one painting.
Mm.
But I looked at it, even as the poems, as you place them on the page, I looked at each one out. I was trying to paint with words. I think Basquiat was trying to write poems with paint.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I felt that in the work because there were all these surprising, I don't want to say elements, but these surprising things in close proximity to each other that you might not have otherwise expected.
Yeah.
Um, and I felt like those proximities created very expansive and kind of magical narratives. So I really enjoyed that. Thank you. And the other
Sorry,
thing,
yeah.
sorry, were you going to
Yeah,
say something?
Baldwin was the guy. So it's Baldwin. Baldwin's title was the Welcome Table. So that's I just love that title. So usually when I'm starting an idea, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I just look for a title that I use kind of like a creative bucket, and I place all my
Then
ideas
you
in there.
start
So the
from
first
there.
yeah, so the first creative bucket that went into the Welcome Table was, I mean, I knew I was going to talk about Entebbe, but the first external creative idea was the code was this idea of the Codex from Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about the welcome table? Because you said it was the first entry
No, that was
point in
just
the
so that
way.
was just the working title.
Oh,
I mean,
okay,
I
okay.
love Baldwin. So the welcome table. So every time I start a project, like we could, if you say to me, I'm going to start right now, I can't start a project because the book is about
Yeah,
to
yeah,
launch. But if you said to me, Nick, we're going to write a play, or Nick, we're going to do a film, or Nick, you know, I don't know what the film is called. I have no idea where it's going, but I'll look for some title so I can my mind and my spirit can start pointing ideas towards it because my mind's thinking all the time, my spirit's thinking all
yeah.
the time, but I don't know. I don't know what to hold on to and what to let go of. But as I find
Mm.
things that move me, that intrigue me, that create inquiry, I start placing them into that bucket.
Into the bucket.
And so yeah, the initial bucket was called the welcome table. So
Oh,
early versions of this, before I knew that I was even writing a collection, it was just called the welcome table. I didn't know if it was going to be, a play, poems, the welcome table, you know?
yeah. I mean,
And
I love this title. I think it's so meta. So I'm glad
mm,
that you found this one.
yeah,
Speaking of writing techniques, uh, there was a mention of a new form in the book. I think it was called the footnote poem.
yeah.
I like one of the speakers I picked up a line from one of your poems that says, "I'm here to look at the unattended moment." And I thought that was really interesting because a lot of times in poetry, the body of the poem is supposed to be the main event or the main narrative. But what you've done is used footnotes to make us look elsewhere, and they function as these whole story worlds, and they they just draw attention to places that might not have otherwise we might not have otherwise gone to those places. And so, yeah, I wanted to tell us about how this form came about, what it gave you the license to do in the work, and speak a little bit about that. And also, wow, inventing a whole form. Excellent.
Yeah, I mean that wasn't my intention. I'd leave that to kind of geniuses like Terence Hayes, but I wasn't trying to invent a form. Um, at one point, I thought these were just going to be prose poems. At one point, they might have been sonnets or other forms. When
Mm.
I first write and I'm writing my draft form, I'm not thinking of any form. I'm not attached to that. I think I was just talking about this to some students today from America that when you try to bend it into a form at the creation, that's almost like me taking um, I'm a master chef and I'm trying to plate up at the beginning. Oh, let's make
Mm,
into this beauty. What you first do is you prepare the meat or you prepare the vegetables and then you cook them or whatever you do, marinate them or whatever to give the flavor. That to me is the writing. So that can take a process. If you're curing meat, that might take 3 years or however you do it, or a year, or if you're seasoning, that might take a while, right? And then once that's done, then you cook it in some kind of way, whatever the cooking, whether it requires heat or cold or water or something. And that to me is the writing process, right? And then once I've written it, then I prepare. So the Explorer collage came from because I was constantly looking at his paintings. I was constantly, reading loads of books. Like you see a bunch of books here. I must have easily read over 300 poetry books alone. That's not to include novels. Maybe novels I maybe read 50. Maybe films. I was watching it. My wife said to me one time because I think because I just consume knowledge. It's painful at times because but she says I didn't know we had what did she say? I didn't know we had what's that, Apple TV, but because there's this one show that I was recommended to watch, and I got it, and so I was just watching anything that could expand my mind
like
to to,
sponge.
to yeah. But so how the form came was ultimately I was trying to make paintings. I did say that to you, and one of the things and I was trying to learn from Basquiat, so I was using anything he did almost as a poetic technique. So explored collage. So I knew I was making collages, so I was colliding. That allowed me to collide worlds. But the other layer that I realized a lot of his works are diptychs and triptychs, and they're beautiful, right? So I was trying to make, I kept saying to my friends and to my supervisor, I want to make a diptych. I want to make a triptych. How do I do that? Now, the obvious one is you just put three poems on a page, but I was like, no. But the other thing I realized I was trying to do, speaking about the exilic experience, but also as a black body, the thing about being a black body is that you're in several worlds at once. So I'll give you an example I guess a warning here, but like so example when George Floyd is being killed on TV and people are filming that and they're showing it on TV and they're showing a man who is innocent saying, I didn't steal the $5, right? And then the law enforcement, the people who are supposed to protect you, do not believe you and are kicking you and killing you as you cry out for your mother. I, as a black man in the UK, have to think, oh, is this how they think of me? Now, the funny thing is, today I went for a meeting. I had to be there for 10. I actually got there early. I got there for 9 accidentally, which is good. I went for a walk. And as I came back to where I was supposed to meet uh, the lady who I was going to do a workshop for her class, American students, um, I see two women walking down the road, two white women walking down the road. And as they see me, they they flinch in fear. Now, I'm supposed to be the threat in some kind of way. But in reality, if something happens, I'm the one in danger. And nobody ever perceives that a black man is in danger. If he gets caught by the police, if he even gets accused, he is in danger. So my feelings are never considered. It's always assumed that I am the threat, that I am the aggressor. So I have to listen to a world that constantly relates to me as a threat. And you think, it's not that bad. No, it's fatal. And George Floyd is the example of that. So what I realize is that how can I express to you the world that you see, where you have me a certain way as a black body, and the world that's going on in my mind, in my heart, and in my spirit. So the footnote poem is the outward thought married to the inward thought. But it's also one painting married to another painting. So if you read the first poem at the top, that's a painting unto itself or a poem unto itself. If you read the second poem at the bottom, that's a painting unto itself or a poem unto itself. But if you follow them through there is a third painting, a hidden painting, or the hidden understanding of Black experience, the Afro surreality. That is the third painting. So that's how I achieve. I didn't know how I got to that because just one day I was like, oh, I wonder. I just said one day I was sitting down, I was like, I wonder if these poems connect. And I just started doing it like I overdid it. Some of them I had to untangle but and they just didn't work. But I mean, at first I thought they worked, but after some very friendly advice from critical friends and my reluctance to let them go, but the ones that worked, and they worked amazingly, and it achieved all those things I was trying to tell you. Now, I didn't go in thinking like that. I wasn't trying to look for that. I was merely, going back to that thing of the chef. I was merely a Michelin star chef. I was merely just trying to get the flavors in and prepare the food before I get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so interestingly, I read the footnote bits first because I was so drawn to how like thick the footnote chunk was, and then I went
Uh-huh.
to the main poem, and then I started reading them together, and they
Yeah,
were
but that's part of the
definitely.
experiment. So you figure them out. Like however you read them, it'll still work. If you read them separately, it'll still work. If you figure out actually there's a third poem, so but basically on the page there are three poems happening at once. And that's the other thing I'm interested in is time and how time works. All things are happening at once,
Yeah,
right?
there was
Time is
definitely that like simultaneity there,
exactly,
multiple
and
worlds. I felt like the center was always just moving. It was never static. It
that's
was
exactly it.
always
So
in flux.
So yeah, for me, that's something that's always in my work. This fascination with time. So what I was trying to do is collapse history. So I want to take you back to the past, but I want the past in your future because the way a triptych works, it places the past, the present, and the future all together. So when you read the footnote poem, it is placing the whole of time onto a page, and that goes back to what we're talking about, what the codices were, and also what Basquiat was doing, and also my intention was to put all my knowledge into one poem. Yeah.
You see, you mentioned the research process so far and your friends giving you your critical friends giving you some advice on the editing process. And if I remember correctly, you worked on this as part of a PhD, which you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
now finished. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
It is a moment for that. Um, yeah, I guess my question was there something about the PhD structure that helped this book along in a particular way? Or was there something about the PhD research experience that was particularly helpful for the book?
Simple answer is yes, but I'd like to break it down. So, ironically, what I found out in doing a PhD is that a lot of the things that you do in a PhD, I was automatically doing when I wrote Kingdom of Gravity. It was almost like that was a PhD.
Mm.
Because I'm very thorough in research, I'm very thorough in investigation. I'm always at it. Um, I really work hard when it comes to art. So there's that. But what a PhD affords you, and you have to acknowledge this, it gives you the backing of a whole institution behind you. So, for example, some of the things I said to you, I would not be able to afford that trip to. I mean, I'd find a way because I'm very tenacious like that, but I wouldn't be able to afford that a whole month trip to America. So you have the backing of a university. Also, a lot of the people I approached, I mean, I'd probably find a way to get to them eventually, but when you have your name and the moniker of at King's College,
Mm.
people listen to what you have to say, right? So I had that, but also I had, and I think I cannot underestimate this. I had probably one of the best supervisors you could ask for in Dr. Sarah Howe. Her intelligence, the way she pushed me into areas to read certain things, also her understanding of parallels of what I was doing, also her willingness to read everything that I presented to her, whether it was if I suggested a film. I mean, there was even a play about Jean-Michel Basquiat and Warhol called The Collaboration that was on here. It's gone to America. It's now going to be made into a film. She came to see that with me, right? So she really made an effort to understand like she didn't assume she knew, even though she was intelligent. What I was trying to do, she didn't just dial it in as a supervisor. She paid close attention to my praxis, but she also challenged it. So I would say that is definitely an advantage, but you have to choose the right supervisor, and thank God, God gave me the right supervisor. Um, there's the financial backing, but also it was that I actually got time to do this. The hardest thing about being an artist is that people assume, especially because you're a poet, the misconception is because you work in such a small area, it's an easy thing to do. But if you ask most people, even just to talk out loud, they balk. Then but now you're asking me to write, and you think the writing I do is easy. It's easy to do bad art. It's hard to do good art. It's even harder to do exceptional art because you have to kind of get out of your way, and you actually have to become a student every time you sit at the page. Yeah.
I Yeah, because I'm doing a PhD right now as well. And so that's why I asked, because I feel like,
Congratulations.
oh,
Yeah.
thank you. The sad truth is that as artists, it's one of the ways to get the time, money, space, support to do these kind of projects. In an ideal world, we would have all of that to make art anyway. But I think also there's something quite delicious that you're using institutional resources to then tear apart Western canons of art and to reconfigure them into this new myth making.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But even then, that notion of the canon, that's just a selection by certain people. I think the canon is actually wider than we think. So, for example, Saint Augustine, he's a very big part of the Western canon. But there's proof to believe that Saint Augustine was a black man, right?
Yeah.
So these teachings by which the West delves into. In fact, I was just on a fellowship in Italy, and there's a scholar who lives in America, and that's what her book is about, and it's about Saint Augustine, but really looking at his life as opposed to just the confessions that he was writing. How did he come around them? And a lot of and this is what I was talking about, centering the black body. If we just center out this notion of the Western culture is very new, but also it's constructed. It's not actually, I mean, I say this politely, it's not real. Yeah, and so a lot of times, many cultures that brought this supposed Western culture into existence are either erased or defamed, right? So yeah, I don't know. I'm not trying, but that's not what I'm trying to center at. What I'm really trying to center at is to get back to the stories that people aren't aware exist, you know?
I think this book is definitely doing that. A bit of a cheeky question.
Go ahead.
I think as writers, we always have a lot of anxieties and doubts while writing. But then once the book is done and it's a lovely little finished piece, I feel like we rarely talk about that honestly. And so I kind of wanted to ask you, was there a particular anxiety while you were writing this book or a snag in the process? And how did you move through it? If you moved through it, it's also fine if you're still there.
Okay, ask me that question again so I can answer it as honestly as possible.
Um, I'm just asking if there was a particular anxiety or a kind of blockade during the writing process that you kind of that moment of saying, oh, is this actually going to happen? Am I going to be able to figure this out or get through it? And how did you move through that?
So I wouldn't say that there was an anxiety while I wrote it. I think I can be impatient. So,
Mm,
the minute I started, I wanted to finish, and that's a mistake. And one of the best pieces of advice that I was given by George Surtees is when I was writing my first collection, because he was my mentor for my first collection. He said to me, everything that you want to do well takes longer than you think. Everything. So a book, a marriage, so in fatherhood, you might think, oh, when they're 18, I'm done. No, fatherhood is your whole life. You're always being a father. And the minute you're a father, you're always a father. The minute you're writing this, so it takes longer than you think. It requires more than you think. So I think it wasn't an anxiety, but what I had to fight was my want to finish this quickly and
mm,
allow the time it takes to be the time it takes. So, for
yeah.
example, before I even I wrote a few poems, but as soon as I started to understand, oh, Basquiat's going to be here, oh, Icarus is going to be here, I actually put that aside and just read loads of poetry. It was exhausting, and just
Mm,
you know, I wasn't even writing poems. I was spending a lot of time reading poetry, watching movies, just observing, like living my life
yeah.
at home, because your life is also part of the art. So, like, even though I don't officially name them, my family's in this book. Um, a lot of the love poems they're actually versions of my wife, if that makes
Mm,
sense,
mm.
right? So, and I couldn't have written them if I wasn't observing my wife. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely having
So
to like nourish your inner self by consuming things, by actually going out and living your life, because you can't just produce out of thin air.
yeah, so the hardest thing was living my life while writing the book. Living my
Mm,
life while writing the book, doing the things that were required. So before jumping into writing, because I can write, it's not hard to, I could write a book of poems in 50 days, but it wouldn't be a great poem because I wouldn't, my life wouldn't have run through it. My reading wouldn't have run through it. And
mm,
you get better with your reading. So my anxiety, my tendency to want to, oh, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. Nah, I had to slow that down and go through the laborious process of reading. I had to experience art and allow it to affect me. I had to go through highs and lows of living because living is never just,
linear.
flat line. There are high parts. Oh, the money's good. Oh, the money's not good. Oh, I feel great. Oh, I don't feel great. I'm a little depressed. All those emotions have to pass through you, and you have to allow that space and still keep being the artist. I think the other thing is was, so even, we had COVID, that was an anxiety. And also there's a part of me that was like, I've had some friends, they published their books right at the beginning, like within a year or 2 years of being in that. And I as much as I know I could have done that, and because even my supervisor had faith that I could finish this book early, I resisted that temptation. So I
Mm.
was like, I'll never get this opportunity again. I'll never be in a space where they just say, Nick, for the next 3 years, go at it. So I treated it like I'd just been accepted for the Olympics and I'm going to train.
Mm.
So that was my anxiety was, oh, but what will I become irrelevant? No, I'm not
Um,
interested. I'm not interested in your concerns. I wasn't interested in trying to get a book deal or anything like that. I wasn't even chasing it. And that was it because that thought was always there. There were publishers who wanted to see the work. I had an agent, I even at one point I burst out of my anxiety and went to my agent. And my agent said, wait. And I think that's the best advice they could give me. And I didn't do any business until I'd officially submitted the work. And that, when you factor in COVID, added an extra probably year and a half. And being that patient isn't my natural way of being. I'm so grateful that I was patient. Not and it's not easy. So I'm not saying, oh, they just be patient. Nah. I was struggling because you worry and I'm trying to make a living for my family, and so that's what's pushing you. But it's telling yourself why you're. I guess that's the anxiety. To be calm, to be measured is hard.
I think even the way we live in the world today, it being this capitalistic place, you're always like trying to do the next thing, the next thing, the next thing.
Yeah.
And you're right, it can be really hard to just let the work marinate, look at it multiple times, wait. So I think that's a really valuable takeaway. And I'm gonna try and do that too, because I'm also a bit guilty of being very impatient and like wanting to push out manuscript after manuscript. Um, oh, thank you for that. Well, we're almost at the end, and the last thing I'll ask you is to give us three literature or media references to take away with us from this interview, other than, oh, including all of the ones you've already mentioned. But if
Mm.
you had to pick three out of all of them,
That's a good one. I'll say Spike Lee.
okay.
And you might not think of him in literature, but his film Do the Right Thing to me is equivalent to, I mean, I might upset some people, but he's like a modern Macbeth, not Macbeth, but more modern Shakespeare. Because
Mm.
that film could be a play, but it's also it encapsulates so much of Black consciousness. But I'm not just talking. I'm speaking as a Black body, but what it does is it reveals a world that isn't often seen, and I can watch that film again and again. Um, if you think music wise, there are many things, but a piece of music. I mean, there was several. I was listening to a lot of jazz and a lot of Beethoven stuff because my last poem, Eroica, is a painting,
It's a
a
bit, yeah.
diptych that Basquiat did, which is that Beethoven wrote. Um, Eroica for Napoleon, and I was listening to that again and again. But while I was also in contemporary time, I was listening to Kendrick Lamar's album. And I was playing that on loop. And it also, there were parts of that. I don't know why. I'd listen to it. And sometimes when I was running and I would cry. And I think that was in the midst of me really putting there are 30 poems that kind of I wrote day after day. And every day I'd go for a run and I'd run myself to exhaustion because I was trying to get all my worries out of my body, all my concerns, all my whatever to sit at the desk. So I'd say Kanye, no, not Kanye, Kendrick's recent album was that. Something else, if we think,
One more thing.
uh, yeah, well, I mean, this name has been coming up a lot, and I really admire this poet. I think they are a genius, and I've seen them a few times. I've been to a lecture, but I'd actually like just, even if we didn't get on, I'd like just to sit in their company and hear them talk. Is Anne Carson.
Oh, Black-Winged Icarus reminds me of Red-Winged Geryon from Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson. And a
Yeah,
lot of reading this work reminded me of Anne Carson's work as well.
oh, I love Anne Carson. Oh man, I love Anne Carson. She can write, but
We should
she
start an Anne
plays it
Carson
off.
fan club.
Yeah, but she plays it off like, but she's a genius. She's a straight, like, I went to a lecture, and that lecture, I think it's helped me I think I've only played it back once, but it's like it's so inside what she says. And I think one of the things I admire her is not just her poetry, it's the way she approaches her art or the arts, because she's not just good at one thing, she's good at several things. But even when she's not good at things, she does. I think she was talking in an interview where sometimes do something you're not good at as well as the thing you're good at, because the thing you're not good at will help you improve the thing that you're good at.
Have a hobby.
Yeah, but no, but be no, no, because as artists, we always want to excel, but it's also good
Yeah.
to fail. Failure is also a part of excelling. And I think as human beings, we struggle with failure. We always think that something is wrong with failure, but
Mm.
failure shows you what you need to work on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and failure, oftentimes we approach failure with anger, either to one ourselves or to one another. But failure should be approached with humility, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I could talk about that for days, but anyway, so I apologize.
Thank you for the three recommendations.
Mm.
Um, and thank you for joining us today and giving us all these tasty insights into your book. To everyone watching, I'd say definitely pick up the new Carthaginians, hang out with Nick and Icarus and Basquiat, and enjoy the collection. All right,
My
Nick.
pleasure being with
Thank
you.
you so
Yeah.
much.
Do you want me to read a poem? No,
Oh, yeah. Could you read a poem for us?
no. Sure. Uh,
I was actually supposed to ask you to do this in the beginning,
don't
and
worry.
I forgot because I was so excited to just get started with the questions. But we can end on a poem.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite poems. It's called Hollywood Africans. Um, the actual paint, it's actually um a Basquiat painting. So there are several ekphrastic poems. This is one of the first paintings, one of the first poems all around Basquiat that I did. Um, because I had to introduce him into this world I was creating, this real but unreal world that I was creating. And it's, I mean, it's really about my wife, but I'm not allowed to write about my wife, but my heart is always thinking about her. So I had to find some way. And the reason I also like it, because I knew it was the first time I knew that Basquiat worked because it won the Poetry London Prize. Not that I was trying to win the prize, but I was very scared. You talk about anxiousness. Maybe I didn't answer that question. The thing I was anxious about is would they get all the things I was trying to do? Would they get how I'm
Mm.
infusing Basquiat, Icarus, Entebbe, the African story, the East African story? Would it all work in one space? And when this did something, I was like, oh, okay, maybe it worked because it was such an ambitious idea. So I'll read this to you, and I just want to say thank you to everyone at Wasafiri and listening to this. Hollywood Africans. The only thing that was certain was that it was June, and we had split a pepperoni pizza between us. An ultraviolet light set the room. Basquiat channel surfed, looking for cartoons, while Icarus prodded a canvas to see if the image fit precisely in the frame. He was certain that someone had broken in. Now, I have to make some lame excuse about how I'm off to the bodega to get some smokes and how I have a craving for meat. I'm bound by this habit. She just smiles. I smile back. Then a voice at the back of my throat says, "You can come with." Cut to me and her at a stop sign. I don't want to play the right game the wrong way. In the silence that has followed us from the front door, I saw the crown of mosquitoes above her head. There is no water, but I can smell the ocean. The man at the store is sweeping the streets, at which point I ask her her name. I've only ever seen her with a glass of I've only ever seen her in a gallery with a glass of prosecco in her hand. I watch the man watching us in that night, in that long summer. She pulls out some ice cream from the freezer and adds it to the bill. The pulp of her lips are flint and fire. The birds are silent, and so is the wind. The rest of the night falls away. In another magic, she calls me by my original name. It is difficult to know what to walk away from. She asks why my eyebrows are raised. We are sitting on top of a park bench watching time. We are a part of it, right here in New York City. This is where the road delivers us towards the edge of difference. Butterscotch drips from my fingers and falls to the tarmac, a beautiful suspension. And then I, or you, or whoever decides to look, hand rolls a cigarette as we rummage through our back pockets for our lights.
Thank you so much.